Mr. Needles, can you take roll call for the record?
Sure thing. Commissioner Bacco, Commissioner Whitaker, Commissioner Godoso,
Here.
Commissioner Neary, and myself, George Needles, present, and Commissioner Rakowski as well.
Thank you. I'd like to welcome everybody tonight for our August 23rd, 2021 preliminary budget meeting. As always, this is a preliminary budget. We might be over in some areas, but as always, it's been our goal to balance our budget and have a zero increase in taxes. So we're going to hopefully reach that goal again this year. With that said, I will turn over the meeting to our township manager, Mr. George Needles, who will walk us through our preliminary budget.
Good evening, everybody. We have a couple different items in front of you. You have the June 30th, 2021 financial statements, as well as a copy of the preliminary budget 2022. The preliminary budget 2022 actually includes the numbers from the June 30th, 2021 financial statements, as well as a reforecast that was done by the staff here and a potential 2022 budget. The other items to just discuss briefly about from the finance perspective is that the bond that the township had previously authorized went out to market, and we were able to receive a blended rate of 2.72% on those funds. That's a very, very good rate, and pretty much puts us in line with what we were trying to achieve with that. So that's very good. Also, we've been working with Dave Woglam of the Manor Center at Lafayette College in search for a finance director, and that search has been progressing forward nicely. So to get on to the financial statements, so if we'll start with the document, it says Township of Upper Chichester financial statements, June 30th, 2021. If you go into the 18th page, it's the first page of the statement of expenditures and revenues. It should look like this. It's the 18th page.
You'll see page 15.
So from a high level perspective, we're having a very good year, and actually fell right in line with where we needed to be from a revenue side, and we're ahead from an expenditure side for the year. Just highlighting a couple things. So, obviously we budgeted with the pretense that we were in the midst of a pandemic, and we weren't really sure what was going to be happening with our revenues, and we weren't really sure what was going to be happening with our expenditures. But a couple things to highlight. So the first department is Department 301, which is our real estate taxes. That's actually coming in pretty good where we anticipated. We should be at budget or slightly above budget by the end of the year. Just underneath that line 01310100 real estate transfer tax. This is an interesting line. So we've always done, I think, pretty well with real estate transfer tax, but we saw a very significant uptick this year. And we anticipate that line item will come in about $100,000 over budget by the end of the year. So we're seeing two things. We're seeing a significant volume in residential sales. So we're seeing a lot of residential sales close, that going out the door. And then also, every couple of years, we have this kind of phenomenon that happens with some of our larger commercial properties, like industrial properties, where they go to a new ownership company. And we had two that transferred this year, which caused pretty good upticks with that. So that's something we saw in 2016 as well. We benefited from that. If you go a little bit further down that line, 01321800 cable television franchise. We talk about this every year. More and more people are cutting the cord, and we're seeing that happen, and we're seeing downward pressure on that revenue source. At $385,000, it is a relatively substantial revenue source outside of our tax income. So it's always a number to watch. Yeah. So we've been budgeting. We budget down every year to anticipate the cord cutter. So we've been doing a pretty good job of anticipating that loss, but we always should note that it is a loss.
So you're saying that it's been going down?
Yeah, every year it goes down. It's been trending down every single year. So that's one of those things that eventually we're going to lose that revenue. Now, yeah. Yeah, it's exactly what it is. Like they're getting rid of cable and streaming, and the way that that law was written, we get the tax on the actual cable, not on the internet.
Right.
The other thing we totally missed the boat on here is 014341010. That's interest earnings. As you may remember, 2 years ago, we were earning interest upwards of about 200 and some $1,000 a year in interest, bank interest. We thought we were being very conservative budgeting at $60,000 this year. However, the bottom has fallen out and we are not earning any interest income right now on our funds. I do think we should start to look at possibly locking some of that, but not in long-term bonds, but like I'm sorry, CDs, but like maybe short-term CDs. We're finding some place that can give us slightly better rates than we're receiving now. Zoning and subdivision land development. Thankfully, that's been up. That's a good sign. That's an indicator that the assessed value will also go up. Plans come in. The building permits are up as well. Items get built. At the end of the day, assessed value increases. So having the subdivision land development, that's 013613330. We are already ahead of budget. We're at 107% for the year, and that's an uptick from the previous year as well. Building permits also coming in high. We're at about 117% the budget for mid-year. We've also gotten additional revenue since then, so that's up pretty significant. And then outside of that, from a revenue perspective, everything is coming in greater than we anticipated in the budget, more in line with the year over year. From an expenditure side, I really didn't find anything in the expenditures that are too far out of whack. As you remember, last year we really worked hard with everybody to get a good understanding of, what are their controllable expenditure items, and really get focus on managing those expenses throughout the course of the year. We are seeing a couple things like sanitation department. Quite a bit of money has been spent on repairing some of the trucks, and then recently, what we've been doing is Jim Putman's been kind of trying to get ahead of the curve with some of these items that are going out of stock. So we've recently had to purchase some additional tires for the police vehicles and for the sanitation vehicles, as rubber is now becoming harder and harder to come by. And as we talk to our suppliers, they're telling us that they're going further and further out. That being said, he's doing that within the constraints of the budget. So he's been doing a fantastic job. I think everybody all around has been doing a fantastic job. I don't really have anything else on the actual financial statements unless anybody has any specific questions. But in general, we are ahead of where we thought we would be mid-year.
For 800, deep cleaning and removal.
Yep.
We haven't, the township hasn't.
No, we had a pretty substantial payment that came in after this June 30th. I think it was about like a $15,000 payment. So we are starting to see that money trickle in. And that's typically, this is typically the time that we start to see that money come in each year. I will note that if looking at the healthcare costs, they are a little out of whack in the budget. As you remember, well, in conjunction with the bond, the retirees healthcare will be shifted over to this new fund that was created. However, we haven't moved those numbers yet because we hadn't created the fund because we haven't funded it through the bond. So over the next 2 months, you'll see that flush out in the financial statements, and it just gets moved to a different fund. And that puts us better in line with where we budgeted.
Where are we at with sanitation and recycling fees?
So sanitation fees have been up with
I'm
the,
looking for this.
yeah, it's Fund 6 up.
They gotta be up.
So solid waste disposable fees were midway through the year, we're at 68% of budget. It does trail off a little bit as we get into the fall, but not significantly. I don't think we're going to miss too far on that.
What number is that, George?
I'm sorry, that is 084273615. And actually, there is page numbers. They're hidden under it would be the second page 19. So when you get to the statement of revenues and expenditures, it would be that page 19.
Oh,
Yes.
8 what?
Yeah, 084273615 is solid waste disposal. But as you see, the line directly underneath it, recycling fees have been coming in good. So we're obviously still paying, so it's not as good as it was years ago when they were paying us for them.
Right.
But that rate is down. And then if you look above that 084272251, that's what I was talking about with the one of the line items that's a little askew.
Mm-hmm.
That is the repair and maintenance of the trash trucks. We've had some pretty decent repairs we've had to make over the past couple of years,
Okay.
as well as purchasing some additional items. In speaking with Putt about that line item and things that we could do for the future to drive that down, he's actually already made the changes. Had to do with the types of engines that they were using in some of the international trucks, and he's already been way ahead of that. So this is kind of like a legacy cost that we're seeing from a couple of years ago.
It's a certain years, we got the same truck that were, pollution systems on.
Yeah.
The regen they call it.
I have a question about the health insurance. Get an email about the health insurance costs going up.
I did get an email about that. Unfortunately, it was after we punched the numbers into this. So when we go over the budget, that will be one of the numbers on the next round that we dig a little bit deeper into. So we were notified by AJ Gallagher that we will have another year of no increases to our health insurance. So when you compound that with the transition to the high deductible plan that we did that a couple of years ago, we're still seeing a considerable amount of savings from that transition to using them for the healthcare insurance.
Did you also get the email that it was going to be a holiday?
Yeah, I didn't quite understand that.
Oh, okay, good.
I'm gonna reach out to them to find out exactly what they were talking about with that and how that works.
Because we thought that, or I should say my finance person thought that, oh, we're going to get 2 months we don't have to pay, right? One of our people. And then the finance director said, no, it sounds like it's going to be split over 10 months instead of 12 months.
Yeah, we'll have to dig
Yeah,
a
we
little
gotta-
deeper into that.
That email was not clear at all.
Exactly. So do you want to go over to the preliminary budget?
Yep.
All right.
Okay.
So if you open up to page 1, mark page 1, bottom right. This is the summary budget. It's got a couple things here for you. In the far left column, you've got the 2021 actual numbers. In the column next to that is the 2021 budget numbers. Next to that is the June 2021 forecast number. And then you've got a percentage and dollar amount change. So as you can see, our 2020 actual revenues were $15,466,000. We budgeted significantly lower at $14,998,000, and that was due to restrictions through COVID. And we're actually reforecasting now to be up, and we're looking like we're going to come in right around $15.5 million. So we should that should be give us some breathing room at the end of the year. Now, if you go to the far right, the first clip at the revenue for the current for the 2022 budget, that should say 2022.
Oh, all the way at the end, right?
Yep.
Okay.
And the next column should say percentage of 2021 forecast. We're looking at about $15.1 million in total revenues. So if you back out the 1.7 million in interfund transfers, it gets us back to what we are is we're roughly about 13.5 million in budget, which is around where we typically are on an annual basis. The next page is the summary of expenditures. So again, you have your 2020 actual. We came in at the end of the year 14.6 million. The current budget, which is 13.5 million. The reforecast has us coming in at about 12.9 million. So we're going to look at that, though. I think there is some room there where we may have to scale up. And then our year-to-date actual, we've got to spend about $8 million. And then our 2021 budget is currently showing at $13.8 million. You add in the debt service to all those numbers, which is on page 3, and it gets you our net position. So we ended 2020 with an actual net position of $110,000 surplus. The June 2021 reforecast shows a potential surplus of $986,000. And the next year budget is currently showing a deficit of $895,000. So again, I think this is a pretty good position for us to be in right now. These are accounting for the wish lists from everybody in their departments. And as Nicole said, we did receive an email saying that there's going to be no increase in our healthcare costs. This does have an increase in healthcare baked into it. Also has a lot of assumptions that get fleshed out over the next month. So I'm very comfortable with where we are with that number. We can go into each one of them if you'd like, but I think really the easiest way to look at this is when you look at the departments. If you go to page 1 and page 2, if you really compare the 2020 actual to the 2022 budget to see kind of where we're in line. So for instance, real estate tax in 2020 produced $4.3 million. We predicted it'll produce 4.26 in 2022. That'll be a number that we'll dive into a little bit further. Business permits and licenses created 523,000 in 2020. We're predicting that it'll be 632,000 in 2022. The majority of that increase came due to the uptick in building permits and uptick in that real estate transfer taxes and sales. So it looks like from a market perspective, sales are going to continue to be hot. So we don't anticipate that number taking too deep of a dive. They have, but we are still seeing properties in the township. The average days on the market is 15 days, which is still really, really good.
Yeah.
So nice. You know what they put it up at? Okay. Gotcha. We are still seeing some people coming in telling us about the bidding wars and still getting well above asking too. So yeah.
Put it up for 460. As high as 513.
Yeah.
And that's one of the, I mean, we can't depend on that in 2022, 23 because
No, but when
right
we look,
now
when we look at that
it's a lot
numbers,
higher.
so we're budgeting a modest increase over previous year's numbers. So we
Right.
budgeted low because we anticipated that, was the market going to continue? People were just, income, but it's continuing. So,
Right.
so we didn't go, the new number is not really a crazy high number. It's just slightly marked above like a previous low. Earned income tax. The good news is we're seeing earned income tax coming in pretty good. We expect to be on budget. So last year we had a actual of 5.2 million in earned income tax. This year we anticipate it is going to be down slightly, about $125,000 to 5.075. However, we do believe that that's going to bounce back slightly next year to 5.2 million. We'll keep focusing on that number. That is a number that, as you remember through this process, that we typically change it quite a bit because we get that information every week. We see a new lot that comes in and we can get a better understanding of where we are benchmarking over previous years. And I mean, that's really it on this. I do have, the cost to collect trash. We currently take that out of, we're not fully funding the sanitation department through the through the trash fee. In benchmarking ourselves to our neighbors, we are considerably lower. We're about $48 a house less than our neighboring municipality, and substantially less to some of the others throughout Delaware County. However, that department has been doing a lot of things to control costs, which are really good. They're currently doing a route study. They came out, they went and drove around with them, and they're starting to compile that information. The objective of that route study is to see if we can find any more productivity in the department, which would be able to put downward pressure on that utilization of the real estate tax funds to supplement that. So I'm not overly concerned on that this year. The department's done a lot of really good moves to try to control those costs there. But as we look at that, that may be an avenue if we need to raise revenue where we can still, we currently still have a tax that funds that. When you get into the actual side for the expenditures, again, it's pretty far right in line with where we look to be.
George, before we get there real
Yeah.
quick, back to the revenue real quick.
Sure.
I mean, with the cell towers and everything going down because of not just the cell towers, or cable people and stuff like that, the franchises. Is there anything in legislation for this wireless box that's going on all the telephone poles? Are we able to
Yeah, I sent something.
piggyback on that? I mean, have they passed anything yet?
Yes.
Nicole,
So,
yet?
Yeah, so
Wise.
I sent something over to Mike Pierce to look into to see if we should probably amend our zoning code for it. So a couple of years ago, the FCC came in and said, hey, this 5G, when they come in, it's going to be regulated through the federal government, and you can't pass zoning laws to capture any revenue from it or anything. They have released some guidance and some new laws, so we do have the ability to collect a permit fee for them to go on the polls when they do come in. We have not had anybody inquire to us about going on in the right of way. That's where it would kick in when it comes in the right of way.
Right.
But yeah, there is an opportunity for that. So it would make sense for us to get that ordinance passed this year, and then to build that into our fee schedule for next year so that we have it going forward. Anybody comes in, we'd have the ability to get some level of rents annual, as well as a permit fee up front. It's minimal. It's they're like, I believe the cap is $250 a box.
Yeah, but how many poles are going to go on? That
Yeah,
adds up.
Yeah, I
For
mean,
something that's just going to sit there
yeah,
for
the
smart cars. That's what it's for.
Right.
exactly. Yeah, the things that we're seeing is, these telecom companies they're not stupid. So like sometimes it's cheaper for them to get onto a residential property than it would be to get into the right of way. But absolutely, we should adopt our zoning code to reflect that and get that in there.
Thanks.
I don't think it will like substantially affect our revenue, but it's like one of those things you want to have, you know?
They start coming in.
From a expenditures perspective, going from looking at the actual in 2020 over to the budget, again, at the bottom line, we were at 14.6 actual in 2020. We're proposing a budget of 13.8. Within that 13.8, we're seeing the cost savings on the healthcare and the pensions through the bond issuance. And we're also seeing the debt issuance, if you flip to the next page, where our debt service goes from 1.4 million to 2.1 million. Now, the 2020 actual number is not a good number to reference here. So if we're on page 3 and we're looking at total expenditures, non-operational debts, because as you remember, we worked some things around where we paid some of that debt out of the capital fund for the 1 year, 2 years ago. And that was, so really in general, we are not, that's a bad number to match to, but all things considered, that debt service number is very manageable considering the amount of savings that we're seeing on the healthcare, post-retirement healthcare, and the pension numbers. Does anybody have any questions that I could dig deeper into the budget on any of these? I believe it's 3%. We're just the 6 million.
Doesn't break salaries down by departments.
If you go, the sheets in the back. So we haven't had the salary conversation, so it's all just filler numbers right now. So my gut would be that the best way to do that would be for the board to hold an executive session between now and the next budget meeting, which would be which we could set tonight. And flesh that out so that when we come with the September budget, we can have real numbers in here, so we can see what that looks like. Keep in mind, we're also in a negotiation with the police right now. So their numbers are also a filler number until that contract is. So the typical process is this is the wish list from everybody as far as their operating expenditures. From now, we usually go back and sit with each of the departments and discuss through the what made up these numbers and see if there's any room to move on them. We adjust the numbers that we see. For instance, like the health insurance, that number came in, we adjust that. Going to the other insurances, looking to see if we can nail down what that percentage will be. We adjust that out. And then we come back to the board with a trimmed down version of the budget based off of conversations with the department heads. And then the next phase would be sitting down with the commissioners and walking through any of them and seeing if there's anything else that needs to get added in or pulled out. And then that's also kind of when we'll have that discussion about the capital projects. So we'll take a look at the capital budget that we had passed previously and see, benchmark our success on it, and then what we can add in or what we need to continue over to the next year. I have not gotten anything from the library. I just use filler numbers at this point.
We had our last meeting, you were on.
Yeah.
I'll double check to see if we had gotten anything, but I have not received anything yet. Usually they come in early September, and we usually flush their number through the first and the second.
We meet on Wednesday, so I'm sure they'll get it over to you. My question is, what is our plan for ARPA funds? What are we gonna do about that? A committee? Like what are your thoughts? I saw there was an ad, I shouldn't say ad, there was an article, Haverford Township and Upper Darby. So Upper Darby basically reiterated the intermediate rule from the U.S. Department of Treasury, right? This is what we're doing with it, just based on that. Haverford is giving back, giving $2,500 to all their local businesses that apply that had a annual revenue that exceeded $25,000. They could apply for those funds for a grant, basically, in the amount of $2,500. So those are just some things that, some municipalities are doing. I think we should talk about what would make the most sense for Upper Chi to do. And so
My concern with doing the grants, giving out the grants, is that Haverford and Upper Darby got a pretty substantial amount of money, so they can eat the administrative costs to manage those programs, while we got effectively $1.7 million to be spread out over 4 years, right?
right.
I think that, again, we had talked about green infrastructure, something that we need in the community. That could be a viable option for that. The other viable option would be using that quote unquote lost income based off of their assumed growth of a municipality. That opens up your ability to utilize it a little bit wider range for capital projects, one-time expenses. So, we could look at possibly what are some of the, one-time expenses that we've looked at, but we haven't really done anything with. So for instance, the Public Works Department has been interested in getting a street sweeper. And when we look at that and we look at the cost for that, it always comes back that really it's really hard to justify the cost.
But did we have that, did we have the deficit that met that percentage?
Yeah, so we do not grow at 4.1%. We don't
exactly.
grow anywhere near 4.1%. So that would be a very reasonable way for us to pull that money back in and utilize it for those expenses. I think it would be nice too, because in that case, you could say, theoretically say like, okay, this money was, since we didn't grow it this much, we brought that money in and it was utilized as match money for this grant and this project. It was utilized for, the purchase of a street sweeper. It was utilized for a stormwater project here.
So you're saying that you're saying that if we didn't have that, we didn't meet the benchmark for the 4.1%, you're still gonna use it? How are you gonna justify that?
So what they did was they said, hey, it's going to be really hard for you to track lost revenues, things that you've diverted due to the pandemic. We'll give you a baseline and say, if you had whatever your revenues were at 2019,
Right?
I believe it was 2019, end of year 2019.
2019, yeah.
So if you've grown, if your revenues year over year, each year grow less than 4.1%, then you can utilize the ARPA funds to make up that balance between what you should have grown based off of their calculation and what you have.
Right.
So that is, when you look through all those rules, that ends up being the easiest way to utilize the funds for a breadth of projects.
So what if you didn't, like, we didn't have a deficit, we weren't under?
Yeah, you don't need a deficit. You just need to not grow by 4.1%.
Okay, so if you do grow about 4.1%, then you can't do
You're
anything.
very, in the eyes of the Treasury Department who said that, you are a very healthy local government with wonderful growth, and you don't need to use the funds to
Right,
help make up for revenue lost.
right.
But I do think, what we should do is brainstorm together a couple of these, say like, here's an idea, here's an idea, here's an idea. So, here is us giving out grants to businesses, and here's how much administrative costs will be involved, and here's how much could be given out. Here's how much administrative costs will be on the back end. Do we want to do this? Here is using be $800,000 now, but here's utilizing $1.7 million for green stormwater infrastructure throughout the community. What does that look like? Or here is a potential option of catching the revenue back and utilizing it for one-time purchases. What does that look like? And get those three, maybe form a small committee to discuss and vet it out even further, and then have a public meeting, gain some public input, see what they say.
None of that money reflects in the here, right?
No,
You're
Nope.
not showing nothing.
no, that just is all in, it's currently sitting in the ARPA fund. And it's not to be touched until that's all taken care of.
Okay.
What's the total amount that we got again, George?
For the ARPA funds,
Yeah.
it'll end up being about 1.7 million. Currently, we've had one distribution of 860,000.
You can use that for Parks and Rec too. Outdoor. I got some definitions back from the state. I'll share them with you.
I'd be interested I'd be interested if the board be willing to discuss the business grants or the stormwater. Those are two things I think
So
that
what
would benefit us.
some municipalities are doing, because they have the business privilege tax, they're going through companies like MRS to make the determinations. They already have their information, right? So they're saying, okay, did this company have a loss in revenue based on their business privilege tax, right? It's easy. They're already administrating, they're already doing it. So we don't have that.
Yeah.
So that's where the expense will come in.
Yeah, it'd be difficult
Who's
to
gonna manage
quantify
it?
it.
Who's gonna, right, exactly. And then if it has to be a qualifier, right, does it? Or do we just say, hey, because you're doing business in Upper Child, we're going to give you a grant, and you give everybody $1,000, something like that. It doesn't necessarily have to be a application or application process.
I just think those are the two points that we've been discussing.
Was there any real hard effect with the COVID with any of the businesses in Upper Child that we're aware of? Any big companies, small companies, or whatever? I mean,
What did you say?
All your restaurants.
I mean,
Yeah.
was there
didn't hear you.
anything, was there any business that was really hit hard in our
Oh.
township?
Okay.
I mean, I know the restaurants and stuff, we went out and tried to do the best we can with them. And
Yeah, I think
And some of the
so. Some of the
other
things
monies.
that people might say, are, you know, our business economy here is resilient, I would say, to an extent. I mean, most of our eateries are takeout, so they were, they were pretty easy, able to adapt their business models pretty quick with that. And then we have a lot of like convenience type stores, and then like personal, like services. I mean, we do have a lot of hair salons. I would imagine that they were affected pretty
Yeah, they were
substantially
shut down
during
for
that.
several months. They just got money. I don't know if that's for across the state. You see that? Anybody see that where they're giving money to the barbershops and hair salons across this? And I think it's across the state. Because they definitely had to shut down totally and were the last ones to open. They should definitely be considered. But I think that did any of the restaurants like stop operating for any amount of time and then reopened, like at the initial start of it? I think it's probably what Ed is trying to say, because even though they were takeout, but did people, because people were staying home, like there was a stay home rule, so nothing
Yeah.
was open, right? Right,
I mean, I know they're open.
right.
They were impacted. A lot of restaurants, like,
Yeah.
they can't find
Yeah. Right, right. So, oh yeah,
I think it'd be a good thing just to look into.
Absolutely.
yeah.
That also might be an opportunity if there's other municipalities that are interested in doing that. If we go to a third party to administer it, we could share some of the costs.
Right.
I do have one question. With the county implementing health board and health inspectors, our budget reflects us having a health inspector in 2022. I think we should, first of all, because I'm not convinced whether or not this is going to be implemented. Matter.
Yeah, I mean, so we've met with the county numerous times. They've taken the opinion that that they will be providing the all of the services related to restaurant inspections and various other things effective January 2022. However, we still have an ordinance on the books that dictates that we provide those functions. So I think that we should proceed forward with the assumption that the first class township code gives us that authority, and I think we should play it by ear as to what the legals say about who has the right to do what.
Me, George, and Michelle, we attended a meeting, and path forward is the county would like to take, as we just said, the county would like to take over the health restaurants, which would eliminate municipalities having their own health inspector. So, we had suggested that could the local municipalities suggest a health inspector to areas, and we were told no. So they're going to, they're moving forward with it, and everything works out. But I think it's smart that we have it in our budget.
Is there municipalities that want to opt out of that? I mean, why can't we?
So basically, what their opinion is now is that the state code states that if they are providing the services, that they have to provide all of the services.
Right.
That is their opinion.
But didn't we say that, what was it, Monaco or Philly?
Yeah.
What
I
other?
mean,
So unfortunately, there's not a lot of history of counties forming health departments because the ones that have them, it's been there for
Been
years.
forever, right.
Montgomery County, though, is an example. I believe this was back, you might predate me on this earth, but when they did it, my understanding was that a lot of the first class townships did not initially transition over. my understanding was that it was due to the First Class Township Code directing that is a responsibility of First Class Townships.
Right, right. So when we initially met with them, they said that it was, they were told by the state, the county was told by the state is that all in, basically, they have to provide all the services. Then when we went down the whole category of everything that's involved with inspections, food, hotels, stores, restaurants, bed bugs, everything. They're like, oh, they were kind of surprised, which is why they set up the individual meetings with municipalities to see the differences based on your location. What you may need something different than a municipality. So they're totally not prepared. So we should our plan until we have a definitive answer as to, if we have to or not.
Right.
I mean,
No,
based,
I
based
agree
off
on
of,
that.
based off of some of the information that they presented, you could make an argument that they're responsible for property maintenance.
Right.
I mean, you could.
Exactly.
So I think that they still have a lot to flush out there, and we want to make sure that we're kind of proceeding forward. Candidly, I really like having a local inspector. They get to know the businesses over time. You know, I mean, Michelle responds to fires in the middle of the night. She responds to complaints on the weekends. I just don't know we're going to have that level of service. The other thing is she knows the business owners and she kind of knows what their issues are, what their, perceived issues are. So sometimes she can kind of see something and know it's not really an issue. Let me go talk to the person, let them know that, disgruntled employee or something like that. Whereas I think bringing someone in green that, is looking at this from a much wider range, they're going to be very like this checking boxes.
We also brought up the point how we work with our local youth organizations. Sometimes they have events and we cut them breaks on permit fees. And we had a discussion, would they be willing to entertain that also? And they, I think bottom line is, they would take it under advisement, but they'd be willing to work with us. But we noted that as well.
Yeah, it would be much more difficult for them to initiate a waiver. You're going to county council for a waiver on a $40 item on, in Upper Chi. You know what I mean?
No, I do think we ought to be prepared. I think Mike should look in to see how far we could get going until they actually tell us no. I see a big headache for
Yeah.
the whole county for that part. I mean, you're right. I mean, there's other. Don't get me wrong. What's that do with our health department as a committee in whole when they come here with the doctor here and then the committee? Does that dissolve? We don't need that no more.
I mean, if the opinion of law is that they provide the health services for all the municipalities in the county, then you would dissolve your local board. You'd basically have no authority to have it, because that authority would be transferred to the county.
which then all the liability goes to them and not us anymore. You would hope. We hope.
I think I'm good for now. I think as Commissioner Neary indicated, please review the budgets. If there's anything missing that needs to be added, please contact the township and the office and we'll get it in there, or anything that you think that needs to be taken out as well.
I just like to make, I mean, just for the one committee on my end, I've been saying it for years for this board, and I think it's here. And I'm not trying to. We have an issue with volunteers. We have an issue with the EMS service. Something we need to talk about. We're meeting. I'm trying to get a meeting like yesterday with those guys. They got all the numbers, but it's hard for them to run the EMS with part-time people. They're coming up with some numbers for us. They're not pretty, but with the fire department, we're okay right now, but that's coming. It's less and less people. I'm going to put it out there. they didn't even get out on a fire alarm this morning. So that's because of personnel not around. They're working or whatever. Um, it's something we really have to sit down and talk as a board. Let Joe and I and George get, when we finally get the numbers from Booth Wynn, and make the decision on what we want to do, what step ahead we want to move forward. I'm not saying anything with the fire department because they're working their operation all together, but eventually it's going to be one fire department. They are downsizing equipment that will save the insurance and not using it and stuff like that. But those guys can't afford a $500,000 fire truck anymore. Not to say that that's what they need or always want sitting on this side of the table, but financially, it's here, and I just something. Once we get these numbers, I want to be open with everybody. I really think, my opinion, and I'm just saying it, we as the board need to be a little more involved in what's going on right now on both ends. They may not like it, but financially, whether I'm here in two more years, if I decide to run or not, if I'm still sitting here or whomever, it's going to be a crisis. And I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, the county's had everything on the table for years with this regional stuff with the police department. They started it with the fire department. It's, I don't know how much more they could do. Not just us, everybody.
Yeah.
Marcus Hook, Lower Chai.
We're first class township, if they fold, we're liable.
I mean, I'm not saying, hey, you're down to one fire department. Your neighboring fire companies will be here, but how many guys are they going to have? I mean, it's very serious. I think it's manageable. Absolutely. I don't think it's crazy. The fire department, that's why I want to try to have a meeting with you guys and just put everything out there.
I've said before, we should train our highway guys for when we're in a jam. We'd be one step ahead of everything.
We're fortunate because, like I said, we could talk about all that later. That was brought up.
Yeah, I mean, they've left work to go fight fires.
Right.
Yes.
Are,
Yeah.
are we talking
Uh,
about
Well,
Right,
firefighting
right.
or the
What-
emergency?
Both.
The ambulances?
The ambulance
Both.
for now.
Well, ambulance for now for the budget, but
Well, when we
Uh,
meet, I also like to review what Hoosier is offering versus
yeah,
what
absolutely.
Boothman is offering.
We'll
So,
put everything out on the table. Nothing to hide there.
That's good.
So just want to put it there.
Very important note that you put up, Ed. I agree. Anything else? Any questions from our citizens?
We need to set up an executive session, didn't it?
What's that?
We need an executive session before the next meeting?
Yeah, so I think well, we'll have one tonight, but for setting the salaries, maybe do before
We can do the caucus.
you do it before the caucus meeting,
Yeah.
before the board meeting, whatever you want to do that.
Let's do it at the caucus meeting. September caucus meeting, if that's
Yeah.
okay with everybody.
Well, I have everybody here. How does September 20th or September 27th look for the next finance meeting?
Days are there.
They're both Mondays.
Okay.
Later, the better for me, the later date.
Yeah,
The good news too is the October board meeting, the caucus meeting's the late meeting,
I
it's the
mean,
7th.
a week may make a big difference for me. I got the 16th.
We good,
Caucus meeting is what?
the caucus meeting won't be till October 7th. It's the late one in October.
Oh, okay.
So if we did the 27th, we still have the 2 weeks till the caucus meeting.
Yeah, I'm good for it. Yeah, the 27th is good for me. The 20th, I may be on the Spirit of Philadelphia. I'm not quite sure yet. So
We'll zoom you in.
I can Zoom, but that's all right.
So we'll set it for the
27th.
27th,
All right.
27th it is.
At what time?
6 p.m.
I'll just put in my-
Somewhere.
All right, so there's no any questions from the board, or for the motion to adjourn.
Second it?
Motion and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for attending.